Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 14, a deeper look into corrections. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode number 14 of the Dog Trainers Podcast. My name is Mariano, that's Brent, and we want to thank you guys so much for the crazy amount of support that we've been receiving, not just for the podcast in general, but especially for the Deeper Look series. And we honestly don't know what to say. I mean, we've been keeping track of all the analytics and things, and for as young as this podcast is, we've just received so much support, so many listeners, so much feedback that I'm almost at a loss for words, but thank you guys very much. And you can find us on Instagram. You can find me at UNTAMEDDOGCO. That's UNTAMEDDOGCO. And you can find Brent at CANISBEHAVIor. That's CANIS behavior. Both of those are all one word. Now, the topic of this episode is going to be a deeper look into corrections. And we know that that's a hot topic. So we figured we'd do our very best to see if we can't navigate the storm for you guys. So over to you, Brent.
What is up, Mariano? Again, another week has gone by. Still miss your face.
I know, man.
Same story every week.
Ever closer, dude. Ever closer. Things are looking up, I think.
I know. When all this quarantine's done, you're going to come visit, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Very nice. That's all I care about. Again, guys, we want to thank you guys so much for just listening. Like, someone is sharing something, and we want to thank you guys. And a little bit of feedback I got the other day is that people like the short, organized, educational versions of these podcasts, which is great because personally that's how I like to learn. But yeah, whoever's sharing this stuff and sending it out, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate all the views or all the listens. So let's go ahead and talk into this. So as we always do with our Deeper Look series, we do have a little bit of a format, and this one we are particularly talking about what corrections are in dog training. Corrections they do exist. A lot of dog trainers will argue whether they should exist, whether it's necessary. And so we'll talk to you guys a little bit from our perspectives. I've been doing this for 12 years. And so we start to see obviously different perspectives, different dogs, what happens when there's undercorrection, overcorrection. So we're going to get into all of that. But I guess the first place for us to start here is let's go ahead and start with our public perspective of what corrections are, right? So what would you say, Mariano, the public perspective of corrections are?
Well, if we're talking, the public is kind of split down the middle on corrections, which is why this is always going to be such an interesting topic, at least, these last few years and probably for the next few moving forward. So right. There's kind of those two camps. There's like pro-correction, anti-correction. And if you consider the position of anti-correction, people, a lot of them say that it's abusive. A lot of them say that it's cruel, which kind of go hand in hand. People who believe those two things typically think so because they think it's unnecessary and it's not based in science, and they kind of fall into they'll kind of paint the picture of the person who does offer corrections in training as like emotional or suspicious of their dog. We kind of get into the whole like stuff you should know, what we talked about there, where they kind of paint someone as like you're one of those, like, what do they call, like, dominance trainers who's just trying to stop your dog from pulling one over on you.
Right. And it paints a little I wouldn't say unrealistic picture, because definitely there's extremes on both sides, but it definitely paints a little bit more of it just has a dark cloud hovering over it, the word correction. Right. Yeah. So a couple things that I wanted to talk about in regards to the public perspective is I think our perspective on the idea of punishment in general as a society and as a people, we're only going to ever be advanced. We're only going to believe what we're used to, right? If that makes sense. So like a lot of the reason that it's so split is because there are people who, have been raised and experienced overcorrection in their childhood, which makes complete sense. Why they wouldn't like overcorrection with a dog, or the concept of being mean, tough, abusive, cruel to a dog, of course. And then on the other side, we see people who, did have a childhood where there were punishments and there were quote unquote corrections done as in our childhoods. And those people turned out fine and actually feel that that's a necessary force in the learning process, right? And so you're always going to see that there's these two camps that are split when we start talking about the ideas of correction. And our job as dog trainers is to kind of help put things in perspective, especially when we're working with dogs, is to put things in perspective for that specific case, that specific dog, because again, things aren't binary, right? There's circumstantial things. There's different behaviors dogs exhibit that humans don't really exhibit that often or for that long. For example, like a baby does not have the natural intention to want to go chase something and put it in its mouth until it's dead. You know what I mean? So there's definitely some canine exclusive habits and behaviors that we're usually controlling when dealing with corrections in dog training.
Yeah, 100%. I think that before we continue and kind of start to express our position on this thing, or our positions if they vary, I want to be clear, kind of like when we talked again about the stuff you should know, that if someone listening to this is pro correction or anti correction or whatever the case, I don't want you to feel like we're attacking you either way. In fact, one of the major reasons that we ever started this podcast, because me and Brent have been friends for years and dog training together for years, and we've always kind of joked at each other, while we were out like at bars and things, like, man, why do dog trainers always, they can really be kind of gung ho in one extreme or the other, and to the point of going after someone who believes of a different sort of perspective. And I think we've been around enough and we've trained enough dogs to know that every of the major, I'm not talking like the weird kind of fringe out there people, but all of the major tried and true dog training methods that have kind of withstood the scrutiny of like the modern age with the need for like proof and social media videos and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They all have their value. They all work in their own particular way, and within each and every one of them individually, there is like a spectrum of how good someone is at that particular methodology. Like there are better food trainers than others, and so on. So,
Right.
we just want to be clear as we start kind of stating where we stand on this whole thing. If you don't agree, it's not a problem. You're welcome here, and we hope vice versa. And it's always good for us to kind of come together and talk these things out so that we can all have open and honest discussions about how we can move this thing forward.
And we're going to do our best to really give context, because
Right.
I think, the reason there's so much disagreement, especially when it comes to correction, is because on both sides, you have individuals that are very protective of their animals, right? So on one side, you have people who are protective and wouldn't dare put the dog under stress or pain or discomfort. And on the other side, there's a whole nother side that believes, if you don't put them under stress or pain, how are they going to know how to behave properly?
Right.
Right. And so you're always going to see these two sides. So just know everyone is coming from the side of we love animals. However, we're trying to achieve harmony from two different sides. So, okay, cool. So let's go into what correction is and its use in dog training. I'll go ahead and just start with my perspectives and the perspectives that I've learned over the years. One of my favorite definitions or just concepts when it comes to what a correction is used for, it's used to block behaviors, right? So for example, I always look at it like, let's say the dog has many decisions to make. So let's say the dog is at this intersection in his mind where he could go left, he could go straight, he could go right, or he could turn back, right? And he has all these different options. Well, the purpose of a correction is to block one of those options from being a possibility, right? And so therefore, if I tell the dog, all right, you can't go left, and this is hypothetical left, obviously, then that means the dog can only go straight or right or back, right? So by me kind of helping limit the dog's options of what they're able to do, we're actually able to guide them to be able to make better decisions, and therefore receive rewards, receive praise, and also learn new behavior sequences that are going to help them, in whatever process they're learning, whether it be sport or whether it be, pet dog training, whether it's, behavior modification, whatever it is, we're trying to teach a new behavioral pattern.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think the way that I look at it, and I'm gonna bust out moving target one more time here, is from this trainer's perspective. I think what a correction is, or what it's supposed to be, is exactly that, something that's meant to block a behavior or a thought process and limit an option. And I think that the reason why, when we talk about why trainers believe this when we're the ones who it's our job to really look into dog behavior and understand the ins and outs of how a dog operates.
Mm-hmm.
It's because when we talk about stress, and people are afraid of putting a dog under stress, or what putting the dog under stress will do to the dog in the long run, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I think one needs to understand proper corrections in context typically mean the dog is already feeling stress to one degree or another, like minus your corrections. And an example being like if the dog is reactive on a leash, I totally believe in food work and its benefit, and I use it every day and stuff like that. But if we're talking leash reactivity, I'm probably going to go with some sort of training method or another, or like a corrective method or another, prong collar, e-collar, something, whatever I think best will motivate this particular dog in this particular set of circumstances. And, I can understand where someone would be afraid of pressuring the dog, but
Mm-hmm.
given that the dog is reacting to people, I would say the dog's already under a pretty significant amount of pressure. And if anything, proper corrections, which we'll get into later what that looks like, can actually go a very long way into pulling that pressure away from a dog. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
where I stand on the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.